Okay, welcome back to another Unstuck. Glad you all are with us virtually in a time lag, a little different than maybe in the past. And those of you who haven't seen an Unstuck before, these are just conversations. I've been doing these for a decade and a half at this point. Really an opportunity to just humanize journeys, professional journeys, artists and entrepreneurs and educators, and really just unpacking the experience people have creating whatever it is that they're creating in the world. And, we tend to lean heavily into the digital world, and we're going to do that today. We have Shannon Daniels, who is the founder and CEO of encaptiv. Hi, Shannon.
Hi. Thanks
Thanks
for
for
having
being here.
me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So let's again. We treat these things really just as conversations that happen to have a microphone involved.
Got mine here too.
So,
They're just
yeah,
hidden
there you
behind
go.
my hair.
Perfect. Right. Good. So let's just dive in. And before we started, we were talking about kind of how your organization has pivoted, and here at District. We've got 200 companies here, so many of them in the digital space, but even the ones that aren't in the digital space, very obviously, it's cliche to say at this point, nobody not affected by COVID on the business side. What's going on with you guys? So what's the nature of the pivot that you're doing in the business?
Yeah, well, encaptiv is an events platform, and we were originally built for in-person presentations and events, and we spent 2019 in beta just learning from our customers what they loved, what they didn't love, what they wanted in the product. And we were just going to market at the beginning of 2020 with our products. And then, of course, COVID kind of put the kibosh on, not kind of, but put the kibosh on in-person events. And so we had to look at what we were doing as a company and say, how can we use technology in a way that really enhances the events experience online and virtually? And so that was our pivot. We spent a good portion of 2020 doing market research, working with event producers, event marketers, event organizers, people from large companies as big as Gartner, all the way to little one-off solopreneurs that do this for a living to collect feedback and understand. And we built a full end-to-end virtual events platform. And we put a lot of focus on, since I'm a communication geek, my background is I studied communication in college and actually taught communication for several years. But how can we take that human communication, that human interaction that happens IRL in real life and convert that to a virtual experience? And that's what we really focused 2020 on, is building that out, getting our MVP into the world. And now we're back where we were at the beginning of 2020, which is launching an entire new product.
So have you started actually going out to the marketplace yet, or that's about to happen?
Yep, we've actually started. I've been doing a lot of sales and marketing activities over the
Right.
past few weeks,
Mhm.
and we actually pre-sold some of the software as well. We
Okay.
launched it and we held several events on the platform in fourth quarter of last year, and
Interesting.
we got some good feedback, and we've made some improvements and enhancements from lessons learned from then. And now we're ready just to let the whole world know that we're here and we exist.
Interesting. So, I mean, it's an engagement. I joked about Zoom, but I mean, I teach. Obviously, I do things like this, all of which used to be live, and now they're all just Zoom, 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 or some version thereof, and a lot of questions about engagement and motivation, and so what are you guys finding? Like moving to a virtual platform, what are you finding? What are your customers finding?
Yeah, it's really difficult to keep people engaged online.
Right.
In person, when people come to an event, they're coming to a conference, they're generally flying or going, they're staying in a hotel, they're there all day.
Right.
They may not go to every single session, but they're more engaged, they're more immersed in it. And so trying to create that same experience online is pretty difficult because people, you're not only competing with their attention as you normally would be against just like their emails and their cell phones and stuff. You now have their computer screen right in front of them for the duration of the event. You've got pets in the background, kids in the background, family members in the background, and there's all kinds of distractions. So keeping people online and engaged is one of the top issues for event organizers in the virtual space. And so we very much try to study the differences between engagement and interaction. This is something that's foundational to communication skills, and really try to say, all right, let's not build one room type that everybody comes into and just a video stream with some chat on the side. Let's look at purpose-driven rooms. This one specifically set up for fireside chat and panels. This type of room set up for education. This type of room is set up for social networking, and so on. And then how do we keep people online and engaged and moving through your event for the entire time, as opposed to signing off and getting distracted? And so we try to purpose design things in a way that creates deeper engagement, not just click a button or chat in a chat, right? So engagement is deeper. Engagement is a want to be involved and to continue on and to keep that conversation going even beyond a session or the event itself.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm old enough to remember. I started my career basically as computers were really entering the workplace in a significant way, right? And the kind of computers you could actually do something with, versus just the early days of kind of basic email and word processing. It's basically they were word processors. And one of the things that was really a struggle was all of the policies, metrics, behavioral norms, like everything was oriented around paper and person, right? Yep. So the entire structure and the policies, like I said, everything was oriented around the assumptions that when we interacted, we'd either be, at a table together, or we'd be transacting a hard piece of paper. And I can remember so much clunkiness noticing as a young person. It felt like these people don't know what they're doing, but in hindsight, it was that they just had to learn how to do everything in the context of a new way of connecting, right? And we're doing that now. Mm-hmm. So are you guys starting to think about, or even beyond yourselves, just I don't play in this corner of the world a lot, so I'm getting curious now. What are we learning? What are we doing? What are we thinking about in terms of how we have to backfill behavioral standards in organizations, expectations, metrics, cultural dynamics, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a very big question. And it's one that the industry is still learning the answer to, right? I think every day I'm learning something new. The industry is learning something new. The events industry has typically been very against going online, right? They were okay with smaller meetings and Zooms and stuff like that, but holding entire conferences and virtual events, that's been something that was just a very small percentage of this market, because it's really hard to replicate that in-person experience of connecting with other people. And two of the biggest reasons people go to events is, one, the networking, and two, the learning, right? And so we're learning every day. We're learning with each event that happens that virtual is good. It has some pros to it that in-person conferences and events didn't necessarily have, where you can expand your audience. You can sell more tickets. You don't have the limitations of your conference center can only hold 1,000 or 2,000 people. Now you can have 10,000 people online, all connecting from all over the world, right? So they're starting to see that. But then there's the whole data and analytics portion of it that was really hard to get from an in-person conference or event as well. There was a certain level of it, but that really deep analytics of the session by session, person by person engagement was a lot harder from that in-person thing. So there's all kinds of new standards being set around that. And right now the industry research is showing that virtual is here to stay. We will go back to in-person conferences and events and expos and all that, because it can't be replaced. But the way that the industry is leaning is there will always be some kind of virtual component attached to it, so you can keep expanding that audience. And then about best practices and stuff, I think we're still learning that. Even us as a technology company, we are very much watching what happens every event we host on the platform and trying to understand ways in which they were trying to use it and weren't using it. I attend events on other platforms to see what people are liking and what they're not. So I don't think it's there yet, but I think we're learning what those standards are going to be going forward and really how to create the best possible experience with that technology. So we're in that phase that you were talking about, where they first rolled out email and they first rolled out like chat and DM on people's computers and stuff like that. I remember Lotus Notes.
Oh, yeah.
Working off of Lotus Notes and having DM, and what a big deal that was to have DM, and the resistance that happened from organizations, because how do we keep people from saying things they shouldn't say? This could be an HR nightmare. We're seeing that in our events. Some of our customers say, we want to turn chat off, because what if someone says something that we don't want said? This could be a problem. It could lead to a lawsuit. And so we're learning to develop our technology around that, so it's highly customizable and configurable, because every organization has different standards and different layers of flexibility associated with them. So yeah, we're very much right back where we were when all those things started to come into play in the workforce.
It's interesting. So there's a couple of things I want to follow up on based on what you just said, but just a quick story that got triggered by something you said early on there. So in my university teaching, one of the things I've noticed this past year is that one of the things that Zoom allows for, paradoxically, is, when I'm in a classroom, we've got, 20 or 25 students in a grad class, they're spread out around the room, and the rooms tend to be big, And so the reality is that there's two things. One, there's one-on-one contact really just as you're engaging with a student. Beyond that, it's broad engagement. But even at that, just the nature of the dynamics, the students that are up front tend to be more, with a screen, everyone's democratized. Everyone's face is there. And I have a requirement, unless they have they ask for a special dispensation because something they got going on, I have a requirement that all screens have to be on. And so everybody is present equally. Even the folks who tend to be kind of shy in the back, their face is equally present. And there's so much more of a one-on-one experience. And it makes it so much more organic to be able to call on people who I know in a traditional context, they would be giving me nonverbal cues that would have me even subconsciously not kind of want to go there. So it's interesting. It's just that little micro thing is such a huge advantage for Zoom in terms of really ensuring that everyone's kind of with the conversation. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember that when I was teaching too. The people that are most engaged in the class and most active learners, they sit towards the front of the classroom and they're always raising their hands and always answering. And one of our parts of every curriculum when I taught was class participation, right? And how do you measure that class participation? It's always up in the air, and you've got the students that answer one question each class period just so they can get a participation grade. But yeah, it brings a whole new dynamic to it when you don't have a front of the classroom or back of the classroom. Everybody's front and center, and you can see those faces very clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me get back to then kind of what you're talking about in the couple of follow-ups I have. So I'm curious, again, I know it's early days and all these things we're all just learning, and folks like you and your company are starting to build and play with, right? So, no expectation of definitive answers, we're figuring it out. But I'm curious, when you said, historically event planners don't like online, absolutely makes sense. Schools don't like online. And now we realize that online is not going away. It's going to be a part of, absolutely, for us too, right? But I'm curious if you're already starting to see how you're going to need to rethink in person, given that online is not going away. What problems does that open up and what opportunities does that open up? Have you guys started really thinking about that formally?
Yeah, what's kind of nice about the fact that we started as a tool for in-person presentations and events is that we're already prepared for that, right? One of the things that I wanted to do, I was thinking back to my days in corporate running sales and marketing teams and doing a lot of events and a lot of speaking and teaching. And then when I was a consultant and I was going around to companies and speaking and teaching, as well as when I was in front of the classroom speaking and teaching. The distraction that was there, or the disengagement, or the very one-way nature of standing up in front of a room and talking at a group of people. The initial idea for encaptiv was to take this cell phone and turn it from a distraction into engagement tool. So live stream your slides and your notes and everything right into audience members' hands, let them interact with you and engage with you in real time. And so we already had all of that built out, and we have engagement algorithms and everything built into it. And so this is going somewhere, I promise. So when we switched over to virtual, we were building out the virtual side of it. What's awesome is that now, with the ability, when we start going back and when things start opening up, we very much, when we were designing the virtual side of this, we're thinking, what is the future of this? The future of this is hybrid. How can we bring two audiences together? How can we take that in-person audience and pull them in and connect them with the virtual audience and make that virtual audience feel like they're part of that in-person audience, that they're there, that they can connect with those people? And the way we've designed the platform is really meant to do that. Is like, if you're sending a poll out, the people that are sitting in the room can be answering the same poll as the people that are virtual, and all of those results feed in. They can submit questions to the same place, and it unifies the audience. And that's just one aspect of it. One of the things that our customer success officer, she spent 6 years at Gartner, leading a lot of their events and planning events and organizing events, anywhere from 50 people to like 30,000 or so people, large scale events. And one of the things we've talked about when thinking of the future of all this and what does that look like, she used this great example of sporting events, right? You go to a football game and there's all this excitement of sitting in the stands and cheering on your team and watching the game unfold, right? And there's this camaraderie and everything that's built. But sports have done a really good job of, for people that can't physically go to the game, watching that game on the television and still having that kind of experience and feeling like so excited, like a fan. They're jumping up off the couch and screaming and yelling. And so that is what us as technology developers, that's our responsibility, is to study that and understand this is going to be part of our future, is that we're going to be uniting audiences from all over the world. And how do we create that experience through the technology that really unifies people and makes them feel, whether they're there in person or they're there virtually, that they're all a unified audience and everybody gets like a really fantastic experience out of that. So it's something that's still being studied and figured out. It's going to take some trial and error, but that's something that we're really working toward as a company and an industry.
It's I haven't heard it before, but I love the analogy to sports, and kind of, you figure it makes a lot of sense, figuring out how you create a different but equally compelling experience for in-person and virtual, because it is a fundamentally different experience, and yet both are compelling, in their own context. It's a great analogy. It's one of the things we, again, in traditional education at the university, the teach at outside of here, it's clunky, quite honestly, right? Because the courses that are purely online during COVID here have worked a lot better than the courses that are, I forget the term that they use, but it's basically some people online and some people in person, to reduce the number of people in the classroom. So if it's a class of 20, you've got 10 online and 10 in person, but the online are all on a single Zoom kind of, interface. And so they can either see the professor or they can see the rest of the class, but not both. And it is just, it's a terrible experience. It's trying to take the exact same experience and just do the same thing on both platforms. And it's a mess, right? Yeah. But again, the sports analogy really clarifies it. Just really, it's a completely different user experience starting point, and then you kind of design from there. So let's, if you're open to it, let's go a little more generic in the conversation about kind of technology and. This is what technologists do, right? Across sectors, this is what they do. It's one of the things that drives people into these kinds of industries. It's, okay, cool. There's a problem. It's a mess. what do we do? Right. And then you go and just start playing with it and you figure out, so tell me about your journey on that. Like what had you dive into this in particular, but then just more broadly, your journey with technology and being a creator in technology and kind of, where you get juice from that and how you got started and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I'm actually not a technologist personally. I have a CTO and a tech team and everything that I work with that builds it. But my background being in communication and public speaking, I really had this hate relationship with a lot of the presentation software out there. There just wasn't really a solution. So of course I did what any person does when they're looking for something better. I Googled it and I didn't really find a solution that answered all the problems that I was trying to solve. And I hadn't, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if this is what I'd be doing, I'd say you're crazy. Um, I had no intention of ever getting into tech or running a tech company, but it's been really exciting. And to your point, part of our jobs as technologists is to solve problems, to see the problems in the world and try to develop practical solutions. So part of that journey has really been, in my opinion, what you should put first and foremost is the customer, the person whose problem you're trying to solve. What is it that they need? Why do they need it? How can you best solve their problem? Because if you put yourself first or you put the technology first, you're going to miss the mark, right? I'm sure we've all used those technologies where we're trying to solve a problem, but then you get frustrated because it's just so complicated. You need a degree in rocket science to figure out, or it was clear that the person that developed it didn't really understand the problem fully or the need that the customer had. And so it's really important to have those conversations with the customer, with the end user, to understand the problem, to understand how to solve that problem appropriately, and then continue to iterate on that. You can't just have those conversations initially and then stop and then off to the races. You have to have those conversations constantly. And because technology is a tool, right? We use it to make things easier, to increase our effectiveness, to solve problems that we have, to automate things. Automation's a big thing right now. And with AI and machine learning coming in, we can have computers do mundane tasks for us that we normally wouldn't have to do. And so it's about understanding the processes involved with that and how to shorten those processes and make those things easier for people at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not a technology person either. I run a tech training school, but I don't code. I don't data science. I don't, any of that stuff. So I'm with you. And as an entrepreneur, which, I think you would classify yourself as an entrepreneur. Yes.
Yep.
As an entrepreneur, but even as a business person inside of a corporate, kind of framework, increasingly the tool you reach, the broad set of tools you reach for are digital tools, right? That's where you go, right? And so this kind of literacy and so this leads up to another place I'd love to explore with you. So we don't need to know how to code. We don't need to know how to data science, as it were, right? But there needs to be a certain level of literacy in the same way that, listen, if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you don't know at least how to talk to your finance people about financial matters, you open yourself up to a lot of risk, right?
Yeah. I call it getting an MBA by fire.
Right.
I'm shocked at how much I've learned in the past 4 to 5 years on this journey of becoming an entrepreneur and all the things you have to know how to do. And when you're running a company, you may not be the finance person or the technologist, but as my CTO says, he says, be careful what you say in front of Shannon. She just might take our jobs, because
Right.
you have to be able to pick things up and understand them and learn and talk about those things, whether it's finance, technology, or something else completely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So then, if you're talking to one of my students here at DAE, who's choosing to go an entrepreneur path and got an idea for some brilliant startup in the tech space, right? Given the experiences you've had these past 4 or 5 years, what's the kind of top 3? I wish somebody told me on day one things.
How long do we have? It's going to be harder than you think. I would say, and persistence and resilience are key. I mean, one of the things that I like to tell people that whenever I'm talking to students, I actually have some student interns now, one from Holberton actually. And one of the things that I like to tell them is it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. Yeah. People see the Facebooks and stuff of the world and they think that they just exploded overnight. Most of the time that doesn't happen. It does happen sometimes, but most of the time it doesn't. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of no's, a lot of fight, a lot of grit to succeed in this. And that's why so many people give up so early on. So I would say that's an important thing. The other thing I like to say is that, you know, those clowns, those bop bags that look like a clown that you blow up and you knock it down, it pops back up, you knock it. That's what it's like being an entrepreneur all day, every day. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to be ready to hear 5,000 no's for every one yes you're going to get. And you have to just stick with it and be ready to roll with those punches because you're going to get a lot of them. So those are two of the big things. And then the third thing is, yeah, you need to be a generalist. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you truly want to start and run a company, you have to get outside of your comfort zone. You have to learn about things that maybe you don't enjoy. You have to do things that maybe you don't enjoy. But when you are the CEO of a tech company, you are the chief everything officer. Until you really are at scale and you have enough funding to hire people to start taking on those other roles, you've got to be able to roll up your sleeves and do a little bit of everything. And if you don't know it, you got to learn it and learn it quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you know, and so much, or so often rather, folks who start something, they start from an idea within a domain of expertise, i.e., a specialization, and they, you know, they can get so myopic on that specialization they crash and burn their business because to your point, they're not willing to adopt that more generalist mindset and understand the value of other disciplines, you know, above and beyond their big idea. Yeah. I want to backtrack in the conversation because I had written down 20 minutes ago when we started something you said that I wanted to come back to, privacy. So one of the things that being online allows for now, like you know what I said earlier, I can see all my students, you know, face to face now. There's no back of the room, front of the room. We already have technologies that can track. In controlled environments like a workplace, you know, online event or a school online event, I can track, are you opening other browsers in the background and watching Netflix while you're supposed to be, you know, in the conference? And I've seen some demonstrations of eye tracking software that allows the, you know, the conference holder or the employee or the, you know, university to watch where does this person look on the screen, you know, right? So because the technology exists, we'll use them, right? Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on the kind of privacy issues with this, where the industry is going to go, what the hurdles are going to be?
Yeah, we really approach every single one of these options one by one. Mm-hmm. So for example, with the in-person version of encaptiv, that was the first version that we rolled out, the beta in 2019 for, we had a lot of market research that we did around that very thing, all the way down to, we have buttons where the attendees can give a thumbs up, a bored face, a heart, a confused face. And through all of our research, we found that people were going to be much more likely to use that if it was anonymous, and they'd be much more truthful if it was anonymous. But at the same time, the presenter or the teacher or the event organizer wants to know who was most engaged, who was most confused, all of that stuff. So we said, how do we balance between giving people their privacy to be able to ask questions and keep them anonymous, or not have everybody in the group see their question, or give feedback via emojis or whatever it may be, while also giving that valuable data to the event organizer or presenter. And we decided to anonymize that stuff, but also roll it into an engagement score for each and every attendee.
Hmm.
So you can look at each attendee, you can see their level of engagement.
Hmm.
And we do track things like active tab. If their tab is not active, their engagement score starts to go down. If their tab is active, their engagement score goes up. We base it on like a credit scoring type thing. You start with a baseline, negative interactions go down, positive interactions go up. So we use an algorithm to try to report that valuable data to the teachers and the organizers and the speakers, while at the same time leaving that level of privacy for those things that people express were most important to be private for the end user, for the attendee or the student.
Yeah.
So it's a hard balance. So you have to look at each and every feature. You can't look at it as like a whole. You have to look at each and everything and what's important to people. What are they willing to give up information on? What are they not? And then there's also the whole selling of data aspect, which is a whole, we could do a whole show on that. But I'm someone that's against the mass collection and selling of data for marketing purposes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that the engagement kind of score, the up and down base. I mean, that solves for a good chunk of class participation, right? That in a live classroom is so tough to actually quantify. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
that's one of the things I was thinking of from
Yeah.
my teacher hat is how do I quantify which students are most engaged? Because at the end, when I've got to give a grade and I've got to submit this grade, I go back through all my notes. I'm like, okay, this person asked 5 questions in this class. This one did this. This
Right.
one never raised their hand. It's an arbitrary grade, but it's a percent of their grade, right? And so it's very important to the students. But just because someone's shy and doesn't like to speak up in a room full of people doesn't mean they're not paying attention and engaged in class. They may just be showing that in a different way by taking copious notes and things like that. So our algorithm takes into account things like view time and note taking and stuff like that.
It's fascinating. It's amazing. So what do you? Let's jump again to a totally different topic. It's not only conversational, it is random. These are 2 central things to my lifelong professional brand. I like to talk, but then I'm very random.
It's perfect for me. I'm ADD, so.
There you go. Perfect. That's right. Which I think actually may be a superpower. Right? I think once we get the research right on this, I think in a digital era, what we call ADD might actually be in many cases a very significant strength. Anyway. So what are you excited about in technology, right? So outside of your company, as you look out the landscape and some of the transformations that are going on, what really excites you in terms of some of the things that are popping up in the world?
I think some things that are popping up in the world are both exciting and scary,
Mm.
right? I'm really interested in the AI and the VR kind of stuff. I think VR is going to be really cool for the future of bringing people together. And something that excites me is if I think back to watching Back to the Future as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
it's having a phone call with someone and having them basically hologram into your home. So it's almost like they're there. And we're on the verge of those things. And it's very expensive technology now, but it always starts that way, right? It starts as very expensive and it starts at the top and then it trickles down and becomes available to the masses. So I think communication technologies are really exploding now, especially COVID kind of forced us into this, right? And while me personally, I've always preached that you cannot replace the in-person experience. You just can't. It's high touch. Only 7% of our communication is the actual words we speak. The other 93% is some aspect of nonverbal. And even though they say nonverbal, a portion of that is also your inflection, your tone, things like that, which
Yep.
A lot of that gets lost in the virtual space. So what I'm excited to see and be part of is how communication technology is going to evolve to add in more and more of that nonverbal to really try to like bring people together globally, right? So that like last night I was on an event with a bunch of people from Malaysia and I could only see from here up, right? And they're like, you got to come to Malaysia and visit with us. And I'm really excited for what technology is going to be doing in the future to zap them into my living room, right? So we can be there together. I can see their full body language and interact with them, right? So that really excites me about technology and the future of it.
Yeah, there's a consumer product available in the music space, but I've seen some demonstrations of haptic technologies. So there's a device you can buy right now that straps across your chest, connected by Bluetooth to your Spotify, whatever. And so you're listening, but it creates physical sensations as if you were like hitting a speaker kind of thing.
Nice.
And so I think those kinds of things, even in the spaces you're talking about, in meetings and, so 3D holographic, but there is a physical kind of set of sensations around being with people that aren't about necessarily touch, but there's just a physical kind of presence. Who knows what kind of neural links we're going to create in the next 10, 20, 40 years to replicate those things. It's fascinating. I'm sitting on a panel in 2 weeks that's about scent and art, the kind of use of scent as an underutilized medium in art, and it's so primary for us as a communication device, right? It's precognitive. It goes. It occurred for us before we had language as animals. So you could see an evolution in the not too distant future, again, 20, 30, 50 years, maybe 100 max, right? Where we're recreating the entire sensory experience. It's fascinating. I'm going to be gone and kind of living on a little hut in Jamaica. I've already decided, these technologies fascinate me, but at a certain point, it's like to me, here's what a lot of these technologies are. I sat. Are you familiar with Clubhouse, the new social media platform?
Yep.
Yeah. So I've been on Clubhouse since December. I sat in a Clubhouse room back in January with some folks out of New York who have this really. I can't quite get an answer where their funding comes from. I'm pretty sure it's government dollars. It's probably DoD money. Anyway, they work in kind of bleeding edge AI world. So they had the first GPT-3 AI persona as one of the speakers, and the whole room was about asking the GPT-3 AI questions, and it was interesting. It was kind of and so my relationship to all these kind of things is sort of like a 3.5 hour really good movie. Like, I've heard it's going to be a really good movie, but I know that I'm only going to get to see the first hour, maybe hour and 10 minutes before I get pulled out. And so I kind of get these things all are going to play out well after my lifetime. So on one level, I'm fascinated by them. On another, it's like, my grandchildren, maybe my great grandchildren are the ones who are actually going to understand what we're just starting on right now.
Yeah, the world's going to look very different.
Yeah.
There's a show I was watching. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it was on Netflix, where they were talking about the future and how we're going to be using nanotechnology to inject ourselves, and
Right.
it'll automatically find illnesses and disease and kill it right then and there. So we're going to live hundreds and hundreds of years, or even thousands, and then we're going to decide to upload our brains to the net so we can our consciousness can live on beyond our humanly bodies. And while all of this stuff is really cool, it's also really it can be scary at times to think about. And there's also implications like ethical, moral, what are we doing to ourselves as human beings? Can we consider ourselves human anymore? I love reading sci-fi and things about that. And I was reading that stuff when I was a kid, and now I'm going, wow, they're developing these things and they actually exist in trials and stuff. But then there's some positive things they can do with a lot of this AI technology as well. Like, instead of sending human soldiers to the front lines, you can build AI technology that become soldiers to go to the front line. So we're losing machines instead of humans. But then if you're injecting those machines with a conscience and with feelings, are we now crossing a line again? So there's a lot of stuff there that can be really, it's really interesting and really neat to see where we're going. And we're going a lot faster and faster and faster with these things, but there's also all kinds of implications that can be frightening at the same time. One fun thing that I've had a thought for over and over is like scratch and sniff TV almost. I love watching cooking shows, but I always want to eat it. I always want to taste it. I want to smell it. So when you were talking about like art and smell, it would be so awesome if I'm watching one of these cooking shows and I can actually smell it, or I can actually taste it. and I think that would be a neat use of technology.
Yeah, I think there's a natural sponsorship opportunity, right? So you know, the odors of this program brought to you by Uber Eats, you know, and you get, because once you're watching the cooking show, you smell it, it's like, okay, now I got to have it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of wild frontiers here. I get worried about the already significant wealth gap that we have on the planet. And, you know, technology by its nature always gets adopted by those who can afford to adopt it. And it tends to accelerate their progress. Eventually, the technology works its way backwards. Yep. But some of these things, to your point, they're moving so quickly and they provide such an advantage that, you know, it's a concerning thing for me around, you know, what happens when you can, you know, we can already provide augmentation for our children in a certain way. If you have money, you get access to better medical care, you get access to better, you know, you can afford glasses, and you can, you know, what happens when, you know, memory upgrades and the like, and, you know, the nanotech where you can infuse something that has you, you know.
Designer babies are already a thing.
That's it. And the wealthy afford those first and just accelerate themselves beyond and make the gap even wider. So that of all the kind of considerations around there, we've really gone way off from our original topic. But of all the things that concern me about where we're going, that one is the one that keeps me up the most, is just, you know, how much are we going to accelerate the wealth gap and the opportunity gap with some of these technologies. But
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I agree with you wholeheartely. And that's what I was alluding to when I said, you know, it's going to get adopted by certain people earlier and others later. And that's what I was talking about. And it does worry me. And as someone who runs a tech company, it's my responsibility to develop tech responsibly. I also think a lot of the tech that's been developed up until now has been developed so quickly, and it's grown so rapidly that some of those things didn't get taken into account. What will this do to us as human beings? And so there's a whole subset now of people who are advocating for responsible technology, moral and ethical technology. And I think as people who are as technologists and people who are building this technology, we need to take those things into account. And we need to understand the human condition and how technology is affecting the human condition in the long term. I mean, just looking at what's happened with the growth of social media, with COVID and everybody being locked in their homes and having to be virtual with other people, that lack of human connection and human interaction has driven up suicide rates and depression and anxiety and all kinds of other negative repercussions. And even before COVID, we were seeing these rates increase among teenagers and children who are living in the social media day and age, because as humans, we're tribal animals, right? We're not meant to just communicate via a text message or a social media post. We connect with each other through conversations and meals and spending time together and going to a concert or whatever it may be. And so technology can be very beneficial, but it can also drive a wedge. So we didn't really understand those repercussions initially, right? And now the research is starting to be there. So it's about thinking through those things as it further develops and gets put out into the world.
Yeah, it's a big emphasis for me with the students here. You know, talk a lot about how just exactly as you said, there's no such thing as neutral technology. Technology is by its nature is going to bias in one direction or another. And if we're not paying attention, we're going to perpetuate things that we intend to leave behind, and we're going to introduce new things that we never intended to introduce simply because we're chasing cool tech.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a good, heavy, depressing place to leave off on. So why don't we end there? This has been great.
Good talk.
Yeah. No, this has been great. I'm going to impose on you at some point in the near future, do a follow-up. There's a couple of things that really require another, kind of 40 minutes on. So I don't want to open those up. So maybe we'll come knocking on your door again soon. But this has been a fabulous conversation. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate, even prior to this, just the support you've had for our students. You said, you've got one of our folks interning right now, but just in the past, I know you've been in here and supported the folks. So I just deeply appreciate that. And of course, this as well.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And we'll throw up, obviously we'll throw up your website into this when the producers do the edit. If you're okay with it, we'll also put your social links up. So if folks want to get in touch. Yeah. Perfect.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Good. All right. So thank you folks for watching. As I said, actually, when you're watching this, you likely are already seeing the social links. Get in touch with Shannon if you have any questions about her organization, about any of the topics that came up. And I'm sure she'd be happy to hear from you. And yeah, there you go. And again, Shannon Daniels, Encaptiv, thank you for being here. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.